Hi again, it's Ryan Miller with Etna Interactive. We're back again today to talk about some changes that have happened at Google that may have a big influence on what you do with your website and your online marketing for your medical practice in 2017. Now, at a glance, as we go through these 5 changes, there's a big shift coming in the way that Google treats what it knows about your mobile website. We're actually shifting to a mobile-first index. We're going to be talking a little bit about the importance of security in the new year. We'll talk about interstitials or pop-ups and how they're influencing the mobile experience, how hidden content that lives behind tabs or JavaScript that slows the way that it loads onto the screen, how that's influencing how your site's going to rank. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about pay-per-click advertising and a new crackdown from Google. So let's just dive right in and get through this as quick as we can. Now, search in the new year is going mobile first. We don't know exactly when, but Google's made the announcement that they are switching to a split index. Now, you may have heard the keyword index before. That's the database, the library of everything that it knows about your website and the corresponding pages. Now, up to this point, they've had a desktop index, meaning they gobble up all of the content from your desktop website, they study what they know about it, and then there were a few points of data for each one of those pages telling Google what it knew about the mobile version of that page. Now, as we live in a mobile-first world, you see it right there, 68% of all healthcare searches in the United States are performed on a mobile device. Since we're in that mobile-first era, Google says, gosh, we should probably have a mobile dedicated index. And what we know is that sometime in the next few months, they haven't said exactly when, they will be beginning to operate, they being Google, from a dedicated mobile index. And while they will continue to maintain a desktop index, it won't be as fresh, it won't be updated as regularly as the mobile version. So what does this mean for you in your medical practice? So a couple things. First and foremost, if you've been lagging on getting a mobile-friendly version of your website, you need to do that now and make sure you pass that mobile-friendly test. For some of you that have taken the approach to mobile, which is separate, not equal, sometimes this is called the M-dot approach, you do need to take a closer look and make sure that the content, everything that's most important to you and to your rankings is present on the mobile version of your site. If you have mobile responsive, you should be just fine. And then finally, if your site is slow, now's the time to work on speeding it up, because page speed is one of those things we know that will influence mobile ranking, again, in that mobile-first era. Let's talk about that second trend and what's coming. Specifically, Google has said in a couple of different ways that security is important. And actually, it happened back in 2014. Google came out and said, all sites should be running on what's called the Secure Sockets Layer, or SSL. And that means that your website address leads with an HTTPS. And when that S is present and when it's properly configured, you get that lock or the green signal at the top of the browser that tells the visitor to your site that they can browse around safely, that all of their activities are encrypted while on the server. So what's come out now is they said, well, in early January, if people are using the Chrome browser and they visit a site that collects sensitive data, and that site is not running on the Secure Sockets layer, they're going to, the warning that you see on the top of the screen there, they're going to get that warning that this is not a secure site, which is sort of like getting a scarlet letter attached to your site. What we do know as well is that a lot of experts in the industry, we all believe that by the middle of next year, that the presence or absence of SSL, the presence in particular, will help a site's search engine rankings. The absence of it may cause a site to fall. So what do you do about it? Well, secure your site now, but take care, because there are a lot of opportunities to make mistakes in how you implement the Secure Sockets layer for your site, so it needs to be done cautiously. So pop-ups, let's talk about that for a second. I think everybody hates pop-ups, and the reality is all of the usability studies I've ever seen have said, look, these really aren't great for customer experience, but they are especially problematic in an environment like mobile, where a single pop-up could disrupt the entire flow of an experience and prevent your users from seeing the page. Well, Google's come out and said, look, this is bad experience for mobile users, and if a searcher searches on Google, finds your site, clicks through, and what they're hit with is some kind of interstitial or pop-up that prevents them from getting to the content, well, you're going to see your search engine rankings fall. So they've come out and they say, hey, there are some bad examples. Largely these are interstitials or pop-ups that completely obscure the content and make it difficult for the user to see behind the pop-up that the page does in fact closely relate to their search. There are some pop-ups or interstitials that are allowed. These are ones that only partially obscure the page, or interstitials that are required to validate the age of a user, of a visitor, before going to some sort of sensitive content. This is a simple one. Do a quick audit of your site and make sure that you don't have this kind of thing in place on your mobile website version. Now, Google said, really isn't new news, but it has new relevance. Google has said, actually in 2015, that content that isn't immediately evident to the user when they arrive on the page, and these would be things like content like you see on your screen there that's behind tabs, content that's in a carousel that you have to manually progress, and also what's called a lazy load or progressive load. These are, you're going to be probably most familiar with this on like shopping sites or mobile experiences where as you slide down the page, the content loads just in time. Well, Google has said our spiders, when pulling content in the index, if it's not visible to the user, it's not going to be considered when we index your page. And that means it's not going to influence your search engine rankings. So the reality on this one is, if you want to rank well, you better make sure that Google can see your content when the page first loads. This final tip here is the 5th in the series, and it's a couple months old now. Google's been cracking down for quite a while on PPC campaigns where they believe the landing page contains unsupported claims. And this is why, $60 billion. This is how much ad revenue Google generated in 2015 from their pay-per-click advertising platform called AdWords. Well, a couple of years ago, Google ended up in a number of lawsuits that were focused on the use of their PPC advertising or pay-per-click advertising platform to advertise, pharmaceutical products, drugs and vitamins, where unsupported claims were present on those pages. And consumers felt defrauded. They felt that Google had somehow validated these ads and held Google responsible. And there was a $500 million settlement against Google, which granted, it's a drop in the bucket against that $60 billion in ad revenue, but it's still concerning. So as a result, Google has come back and basically said, look, we're not going to let you run ads on our network if you're landing consumers on content that isn't accurate, that's not realistic or entirely truthful, and we expect you to substantiate it. And interestingly, they've come back and they've said things like before and after photos and testimonial content, those are claims that need to be validated. So if you're not supporting those claims, Google's going to put a stop to your pay-per-click advertising. Well, what do? It's a fairly simple checklist, but it does require some significant work. If you're landing consumers on your own website, you're likely to need some changes. If you're landing them on a landing page or smaller collection of pages just for your pay-per-click campaign, it might be a little bit easier to implement. And the checklist basically looks like this. It's adding a disclaimer to any unsupported claim, and it's important to remember here, things like your before and after photos, your testimonials, and any numerical claims of performance, what you can expect from the treatment, those all need to have that asterisk as well as a disclaimer to either cite the source or disclaim that these results are for an individual patient and they could vary for the individual user who's visiting your site. At the end of the day, if you're using guarantees, which are very few and far between in our industry, those guarantees need to be pulled away unless they are guarantees that the consumer can get all of their money back if they aren't satisfied with the treatment. So summing these things back up again, first and foremost, we do need to recognize that Google's shifting to this place where it truly is a mobile-first era. Right? They will have an independent mobile index, and we need to make sure that the site is mobile friendly. Security is now important, and somewhere between January and June, we know it's going to influence rankings. In January, it's going to influence display on the Chrome browser, so it's an important time to embrace SSL. Sites that do use disruptive interstitials that have those pop-ups that may disrupt the flow on mobile, those need to be changed. And if you have any content that's hidden behind tabs, underneath a scroller or carousel, or if you're using what's called progressive load, there might need to be some adaptations made to make sure that Google can safely index all of that mobile content. And again, if you're active in PPC, we can start to get ahead of those changes now by adding those disclaimers to support the claims on your website. So again, for all of Etna's clients who are aligned with an account executive, you're actively engaged in marketing, we're taking care of all of these things for you so you don't have anything to worry about. For everybody else who subscribes to our newsletter, this may be an opportunity for you to have an important conversation with your advisor to get ahead of what's coming for 2017 with Google. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon. And as usual, if you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, send me an email, hit us up on Facebook, or use the contact form directly on our site. Thanks so much.